Okay. I would like to welcome everybody to this month's Cater Linked Uncensored and In Charge. I'm Erin Childs, and I appreciate all of you for joining me today. We are going to be talking about really always hot topic, I think, is the manager of restaurants. And recently, I've been working through some manager situations with different clients and having other people call me and ask me about managers. And so for this month, I just thought it would be a really great topic for us to cover. Some of the things I will go through. I don't want to offend anybody. If you are a manager, if you support managers, I definitely want to just kind of make you aware of, things that you might not always think about. But I do think that a lot of the stuff I'll cover today has a lot of value to add. So it's basically, I'll get into it about, are you asking the right questions and why the wrong manager can essentially sink your restaurant or, kind of create a lot of havoc for your brand. So I will begin with what most of you probably all understand and are familiar with, that the restaurant industry as we know it is just a very fast-paced, people-driven industry, and it's one that is really ever changing between flavors and technology and all of this stuff. But one of the things that is a grounding force, I think, in restaurants that we always need to remember is that restaurants are about hospitality and taking care of those who come and eat at our restaurants and dine at our restaurants. And I think that that's where this manager that we're going to talk about plays such a pivotal point. And, I think that everybody in the restaurant industry needs grit and stamina to be able to truly succeed and survive it. And so we're going to talk a lot today about what that looks like and how you can achieve it, and hopefully have some questions and answers after I kind of go through it. But we know that managers are the backbone of daily operations and the customer experience. And a bad manager doesn't just underperform for those things, right? And not act accordingly, if you will, but they create a ripple effect across an entire business that will trickle down if you do not have the right key players in place. And if you keep that around long enough, you're going to have serious issues and you're going to see them, and they're just going to, unfortunately come to the surface, and at some point you will be addressing it. And so what I want to do today is really try to go through setting expectations and be really clear about some of the scenarios that have been presented to me that I've personally experienced, that I know some of you have experienced, and really kind of just go through what the role of a manager is and how we can kind of keep on track to making sure that we're picking the right people for our brands and that we've got the good ones in place. A manager, in the way I think I look at it, but I hope all of us look at it, is that they're overseeing the staff and everything that the staff does, right? They're overseeing the restaurant. They're overseeing, in some cases, and this is the case that I'm really speaking to, this level of manager, general manager. But we can kind of break it apart if anyone wants to further. But they are responsible for essentially the overall morale for the entire restaurant. And so you always are going to have to, when you're hiring, look through the lens of what that manager is looking at, right? So what is the team that that person is going to be managing? How does that team operate under this manager? And do they jive well, right? And this is really interesting. I don't want to get off topic because I want to circle back to this, but well, I'm gonna keep going here really quickly. So I'm gonna take one step back. I'm going to go back to making sure that this manager is overseeing the staff and the morale and making sure they've got the right team that wants to work for them, right? Your manager that you want is going to ensure customer satisfaction. They're going to want to care as much as you do, as much as the team members care, right? Everybody's supposed to care. They want to be able to manage their P&Ls properly, make sure the inventory is done properly, understand your budgeting, understand the scheduling, be be aware, be, empathetic to scheduling conflicts if somebody comes to them and has something well in advance and can cover their shift. I think that's an important role of a manager in working with a team. And then one of the other important parts of this manager that we're talking about is, are they teaching others important skills that are needed to manage, right? And we'll get into that in a little bit. But all of these things are setting the tone for the workplace culture. And, we want to make sure that they have the right energy to drive this type of enthusiasm and this type of efficiency and positivity with making sure everybody's happy, not just the customers, but the team members. And of course, in all of this, making sure that the food is really fresh, right? We want a manager that handles conflict and pressure in real time and know where to start if a situation happens, that they're set up for success on how to deal with a problem that they might not be necessarily trained on or comfortable in, right? So constant education and training, and all of those things I think are super important for us. And this is what's creating this, good manager that's responsible for everything within the four walls, right? So some warning signs. And this is interesting because I recently had a phone call with somebody that this manager has been with them about 3.5 years. Okay. So they would tell me that this manager is awesome. And he was everything that I was just talking about. He was empathetic. He ran his numbers well. He kept it tight. He was good. People loved him until one day they didn't. And so this phone call came in and they said, Erin, I don't know what to do. I have this manager. He's quitting. He's decided he's burnt out and done and he wants to move on. But this was somebody that was totally caught out of the blue and I can't believe it and yada, yada, yada. Okay. So one of the things I want to talk about right now is warning signs, because I asked this owner, I said, well, did you see this coming? Was the first thing I asked. And they said, no, I didn't. It's really out of the blue. And so I started digging a little deeper. And as it turns out, we do see warning signs, right? And so I want everyone to be aware of warning signs that might be popping through where you're going to, after everything's gone down, take a step back and go, shoot, okay, I get it. So what are some of the warning signs that we might, be seen and not realizing? So when poor communication starts, okay, so if they have good communication and then all of a sudden there's things, and I'm talking, my example is on this one specific gentleman, but I could give this and relate this to any single situation. So if you have situations that you want to talk through about this, I'm happy to dive deeper. But they had good communication and all of a sudden the communication becomes poor, right? What do you do in that certain circumstance? So going back to this, you take 4 steps back and you go, well, I have an area of expectation for communication. These are how I expect managers to communicate with me. As the leader of a company, I set that stage. The day that that starts to shift, I note it and I go after and say, hey, what's up? What's going on here? I haven't heard from you, or you aren't doing X, Y, and Z. Your communication has shifted. Why? Right? Sometimes, and in this case of this story, that didn't happen, okay, with the big boss. And so one of the things that it was a difficult conversation to have was, that's on that person, that owner, that boss. If you're allowing for poor communication to leak into your space, then you're setting yourself up for possibly a bad situation with this manager or a shift in this manager, right? But if you're really involved with your team and you're understanding what's going on in everybody's situation of their, if they're frustrated on something, if they're burnt out, if they need a break, it's our job as leaders to be able to see that. And hopefully we've set up an open communication where that they feel that they can come to you. Okay. So back to my warning signs: poor communication. Okay. Inconsistent standards. This is a big one. So inconsistent standards means, well, one day they were doing this great and they had their team members keeping that line nice and tight. And then all of a sudden we notice things are a little bit dirty, or we notice the trash wasn't taken out the night before. Little things. These are details that actually end up mattering at the end of the day. Okay. Neglecting the responsibilities is the flag for everybody. You come in, you talk to the manager, their excuses. Excuses is another big one for me. If you start to see turnover within the team of the manager, this is another big warning sign. Okay. And then, of course, when complaints start coming into the restaurant, then I feel like we've really hit a different place. And as I kind of did it in that order, as you can see, with the communication, inconsistent standards, neglecting responsibilities, high turnover, and then customer complaints, because it always starts with a little bit of something and then it starts trickling, right? And so this manager is not doing their job. And then all of a sudden we're seeing that employees are like, well, they're not doing it, so why should I do it? And this becomes this environment of this very toxic and very scary decline of what's happening within the four walls. So my next point is about consequences of hiring this wrong manager. Okay, so if we hire one bad manager, or the manager goes bad after a few years, to put it that way, you're going to get high turnover rates and higher training costs. You're going to get low morale, low productivity, and your service is going to be horrendous. And I use that term not lightly, because I think all of us have probably walked into a place, it feels gross. Nobody's welcoming us. Nobody's, hey, thanks for coming in today. How are you? Do you have any questions? There's no personalization. There's no customer service, as I would say, towards the customers. And so this one person that we've hired, that all of a sudden just was a good hire because we hired them, we thought they were good, then became bad, really is now taking a big toll on the inside of our company. And either we're allowing it and we're turning our head, or operations deciding our pecking orders of how this is going to go. Operations is doing nothing about it. And operations is almost turning their head themselves, which is concerning within its own right. But again, I'll go back and say it always comes from the top, right? So if we're questioning things on who's leading and who's managing our team members, if there are issues, it's coming from the top. 9 out of 10 times, I've yet to be proven wrong on that, I think. So we've got high turnover, low morale, bad customer service. I'll go in operational chaos as well, because orders are missed. I mean, this feels like, this seems to one of these people I was talking to, they said, well, missed orders, that seems like it's impossible. But I have had customers in catering operations literally not have the person organized enough to know that they have X amount of orders, because they might not have the technology or the money to produce the right system for their company. So they're doing things a little bit older, and the person who's running it is overwhelmed. They miss an order. It's all very possible. And so the operational chaos that comes in with misscheduling, poor inventory because they didn't plan on a $10,000 catering order. All of this stuff is very real under a bad manager or somebody who isn't paying attention to what's happening inside four walls, inside a catering operation, inside. You can connect this to any company. It doesn't necessarily have to be just in the catering world. It can be in an actual restaurant that isn't necessarily catering, right? Although, quick plug for catering, everybody should be. But this is all really, really important, because what's going to happen at the end is now you're spitting out damaged brand reputation for yourself. And it's really hard to recover if you've burnt bridges or given people a bad taste in their mouth. Because you didn't do anything about this manager that was essentially bringing the house down. And statistically speaking, to jump to real statistical numbers, the cost of hiring a bad manager can cost a brand anywhere from $12,000 to $20,000, and I say more because I think that the loss of business that you can encounter from that. So, say mistakes in catering orders, say forgotten items because people aren't doing their job and double checking catering orders and making sure that the managers, organized enough to execute all of this stuff. I think that it can go well past those numbers if you're really diving into it. And another interesting statistic that I found when I was doing some research on this is that over 60% of hospitality employees cite poor management as the reason for why they quit. And I'm blessed because I feel as I've always come from a positive work environment where the culture is the base fabric for everything that we do and believe in. And we build it from there, obviously, with good food and everything. I really was fascinated to see that was even possible, that over half of the people that would leave would be because of their manager. But then when I'm sitting and going through all of this stuff, and I'm saying, well, obviously, this is so obvious. Why would you want to work for somebody that doesn't care and cuts corners and does all of these things, right? And really, it goes into such a cultural, you know, uh, I'll take a step back. It really becomes, for me, the way I see these things is creating this culture and making sure this manager fits into your culture of your business, starts from the top. And we as leaders, this is something I really believe deeply in, need to model acceptable behavior from the very beginning. And I will tell you, in this conversation I had the other week with this owner who was talking about this gentleman who was a good hire. They said, Erin, this person modeled good behavior. This person modeled good management skills. We hired them because they were doing the job until one day they didn't. And then I turned and asked that person if they themselves have changed their behavior. And they paused and I think became a little bit more aware of some of their frustrations that they were experiencing with this person, and how it had kind of not been communicated properly. And I can go back to what I was originally saying on warning signs, right? Poor communication. So here we're blaming this manager for leaving and thinking that this wasn't the right person, when maybe sometimes my point here is that we as leaders might also need to question whether or not we're meeting the expectations that are expected of us, and that we're doing what we're expecting our team members and our managers to be doing. And I think that that was a little bit of a light for this person as they realized that their communication began to break down, and the trickle effect of what that gave to them. Negative leadership in general leads to gossip and conflict and disengagement amongst the team. It might start very slowly, but picture it as like this toxic weed that's taking over everything, right? It eventually finds everywhere that it needs to go. A strong culture, a good, strong leader, a good, big boss, all of it trickles down to strong culture, retention, teamwork, pride in work, people being very proud to go to work every day. That's one question that I always ask is, are you proud of what you do and to go to work every day? And if there are people in your organizations that have some hesitancy, that's a great place for people, for managers to take time and work with them on fixing that so that that isn't necessarily their experience or their how they feel. I think that that's something that you should figure out the root of and try and fix it, because what that's doing is it's helping your culture and it's helping that person stay there and want to be there. So I was talking about really quickly, I was giving you that story about the manager that was good 3 years, did his stint, decided he was out, and was moving on. And the owner was mad about it. Didn't Felt slighted, felt shorted. And it reminded me of experiences that I've had and that I've been taught as a leader. And that was when it's time for somebody to go, right? For whatever reason. Hopefully it's a really good reason. Hopefully it's a giant job boost. Hopefully it's, for whatever circumstance they're choosing to leave, but it's an important one to them and they're ready to go. And I told this owner, I said, I think that you need to take a step back and be thankful for the 3 years that you got from him. And I think that you need to realign what your expectations are and the expectations that you want to hold for your manager that comes in next. Because at the end of the day, what we started to realize here was that at the very top, there was a shift. And that shift began the shift of this manager and this manager deciding that it was time for him to move on. And so when I give that example, I want everybody to understand, to check themselves in a way, because this is me unfiltered. I've learned that sometimes we aren't aware of what's happening with us, and it's affecting our managers, and those managers are affecting everybody under them, and it's trickling down, and it doesn't mean to be toxic or bad, but it has a tendency to more often than not. And so my point for us today is to really kind of just check ourselves a little bit, because if your manager is leaving or your manager is unhappy, we need to understand why and make sure that we have a checkpoint on our culture and our environment and what we believe in and what we're trying to teach our team members, so that we have a very good team in place, and one that wants to work together and comes together in hard times, so that they can be successful as a whole. So in this conversation, we go to, how do we hire the right manager, right? Now, remember, I said this one person I'm speaking about in this example as my example person, they said they were awesome. Obviously, we all want to hire the right manager and not have this manager leave. So we hired the right manager, they say to me, Erin, and this person decided to leave. But I said, well, then for the next round, maybe you just have to restructure the way that things are going. Maybe your interviews weren't structured in the way. Maybe you didn't ask them the right questions. Maybe you need to ask, do you have a 3-year plan? Do you have a 5-year plan? Maybe you need to put that plan together for them. Maybe it's about checking the references thoroughly. How long have these managers been at these jobs? Um, and here's a really big one for me that I really think really needs to come into play today more than ever, and that is the emotional intelligence, and not just people's experience. I think emotional intelligence today helps create the culture that many people believe that they have within their brands, right? Are they empathetic? Are they kind? Are they caring? Do they want to be there? Do they want their team members to be there? Do they feel valued? Do they make sure their team members feel valued? Emotional intelligence, I think, really goes hand in hand more so today in this post-COVID world, in hospitality, because we need connection. And I think we've learned that. Restaurants are a place for connection, even if it's in the fast casual world, even in fine dining, even in, fast food, it doesn't matter. But there's a huge connection that comes with our industry. And I think that making sure your manager has it and he or she or they are teaching it as it goes down the line is extremely important. And then another one that I think is big that we don't do enough of is we do trial shifts. I know they do working interviews. They bring people in, they have them work certain stations and understand the different things, and different people will train them on all of this stuff and go through it. But I think that it needs to be a little bit deeper than that. I think we need to spend a little bit more time inside the 4 walls and outside of the 4 walls with these people, getting to know them a little bit better so that we can really get a sense as leaders if this person's going to align with the values of our brands and what we look for in a manager. And then the number one is promoting within as much as you possibly can. And one of the things that I find extremely valuable is, and I always, I coach this a lot now, and it's about who on your team can replace you and who can you promote to replace that person. And if you go to ask any role in your restaurant, right? I'm talking the dishwashers to the general managers. If you go and you say, who in our store can replace you? It is a great practice for your brand to do that. And it's not because you're going to lose your job. It's because you're going to take that person and get them to the next role and climb the ladder. And that ultimately creates this absolutely gorgeous, beautiful culture of promoting within. Obviously, that's not always the case, and that's fine. There are so many deserving folks that should come into brands too that want to be a part of it. But when you have a culture where you are training and teaching below you to get that person to come up to your level, you really have a very strong brand and a good community of people working together to take your business to the next level. And you as the leader have created that. And that is something that really needs to stand out and really needs to become part of the hiring process, the communication, the talking about everything that's happening within the 4 walls, because a lot of good can come from that. And you'll get the longevity, I think, that you're looking for from team members to managers, and so on as they climb that ladder with you. So before I go into questions, I just want to kind of do my little conclusion on making sure that people, when you're really going to hire somebody, you're looking for smart, obviously, people who will succeed, strong, coachable, teachable, all of these things for your managers. But I also ask that you take a minute to look at yourself and say, have I been coaching myself enough? Are there things that I can continue? There should be things that we all continue to learn. That should absolutely be a daily, habit for all of us. But ask yourself these things when you're looking at your next hire of your manager, and ask what areas you could improve on, and where you can gain more knowledge and understanding to inspire them. Because if you are capable of doing that, that's going to pass down to your manager. And a great manager, as we all know, is an investment in the restaurant's future, your catering operations future. And it's not, you don't want to kind of sell yourself short. You don't want to cut corners. You want to be patient and make sure you find the right one. And it might be that you have to get a little bit dirtier than normal until that right manager goes into play. But I've worked with people who have hired the wrong ones. They knew they weren't the right ones, or the team of hiring, uh, the hiring team didn't all agree. And so one person just finally threw their hands up and said, fine, you guys decide whatever you want. And then the other one ended up not being the right fit, and they let the good one go. So you want to make sure that you're cohesive and agreeing on everything, before you make your wrong decisions or settle, because it can be devastating, and it can ruin even a good culture if you already have one and the culture is established and the manager moves on, and then you bring in this bad manager and they ruin the culture pretty quickly. So I'm going to pause there, because I know that there are a bunch of questions that are in the queue, and I'm going to try to bring those up. And yeah, let's go into the questions. Oh, wait, hold on 1 second. I'm so sorry. Hold on. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I see him now. Okay. How can we ensure the hiring process aligns with the culture we're trying to build across all our locations? Okay. So, let me go into this. Okay. So, one, aligning your hiring process with your culture, that you're trying to build, is going to require the intentional strategy, consistency, and clear understanding, in my opinion, for what culture looks like. So, one, do you have it defined, what your culture is? And can you build off of that, right? So does everybody at your company know what your culture is, and can you build off of that? That's the first thing. Making sure that it aligns there, is going through your checklists of what you expect and what the strategy is and how you guys execute it. If that answers that question. Okay, so what role should senior leadership play in evaluating and developing frontline managers? I think this is where I was saying at the beginning of this call, senior management, we need to ask ourselves an honest question: is, are we as involved as we think we are? Are we leaving too much on the table? And my answer is, they should play every role in this, because the more involved senior leadership is, the better off your culture can be. Remember, it trickles down. Okay. So I think that this will be easier answered. I think somebody also had said this. Well, that's easier said than done. If you have 3 stores, 10 stores, 20 stores, that's a lot easier to do than if you have 500. But that's true. However, everybody has a pecking order of how they've got to report to somebody. So if it's part of the original culture, or it's part of the process, then from the very beginning, then it should be able to carry on. And my point is senior leadership better be there. And if they're not, then, and your manager sucks, then I'm going to senior management to say, what are you doing? See, I'm unfiltered. See, that's what happens. Okay, so how do we balance promoting from within with bringing in outside talent to avoid stagnation? Hmm. Um, okay, well, that's a balance. Um, it's kind of what I was saying before. Have, if you know that you have somebody that can replace you or be promoted into a role that's higher from where they are, I'll just go really basic for restaurants and just somebody that works the cash register gets promoted into be the line shift manager, right? And that's awesome. They've seen it, they kind of understand it, they understand the food, the brand, all of it, they understand it, so it's easier, right? However, there might be somebody that comes in that has line shift management experience as well as catering manager experience. Okay. And so you might say, okay, you know what? This person with your team of people, if there's a team of people that goes through the hiring process, you take that and you say, okay, we've got these two candidates. One's internal, one's external. One definitely, the external, has a little bit more understanding and experience in doing two important pieces of our business. One that we probably could also use to enhance into event management or putting the catering orders together and executing them out the door. I'm just flying by the seat of my pants here. So for that reason, you might decide for that role that that is an external positive outside hire for you guys. Obviously, they meet the expectations for everything else that we talked about earlier in your standards of which you have at your brands. However, this cash register person who does deserve the promotion isn't just going to be forgotten about, but you now know that you've got this new person that's come in that's going to be able to execute on a higher level in this different area for you, allowing for you to say, okay, we're going to wait on the promotion of the cash register person because she is awesome at cash register and she's got this great personality, or he's got this great personality and it's working. We're going to be open and communicating that move to them. We're going to hire in this old external person, and this old employee of ours is going to understand that they're in the queue to move forward if they want to, obviously. Hope that answers that question. Yes. Oh, speak to the hidden costs of a bad hire that operations often overlooks. Yeah, not training your people well enough and putting them through your training process as you see fit, and they go through all of the things and they check all the boxes, and then they're just thrown out into the circumstances, and all of us do it and we don't train them enough. And you know what? On your exit interview for any of your managers or any of your team members leaving, I bet you 9 times out of 10, some of them will be like, I wasn't trained properly, or they just threw me into it, figure it out on my own. And that is a absolute disaster if you aren't teaching your employees every little piece of the business that they need to understand, like waste or budgets. I mean, I work with one client right now, and it's making sure that the people who make the sandwiches and burritos understand how much all of that stuff costs and what their budget is. Because if they understand that, then maybe they won't throw out that piece of bologna into the garbage because they understand that it costs 5 cents, and that goes, add that up. They threw out 10 pieces of bologna just in the morning. So there are many overlooked hidden costs in a bad hire, and it's all about not communicating properly throughout your whole your whole brand. I mean, honestly, everything should be transparent and shared. So, what are 3 questions you recommend? Oh, okay. 3 questions you recommend asking a manager interview to reveal emotional intelligence. Okay. So, I actually have 2, but um let me think about this. Okay. Favorite questions to ask in an interview. Okay. Um, what, okay, so this has to do with the emotional intelligence stuff that I was talking about earlier. Okay. Describe a time a team member, this was asked, describe a time when a team member was struggling or underperforming, and how did you handle the situation? Okay. Now, there's 2 parts to this. One, um, this this type of question um, will work because what it's going to do is it's assessing the empathy that I was talking about, and it's seeing if you have actually if you're actually hiring an active listener. Okay. And somebody that's going to say, oh geez, this team member is struggling, are you okay? I pull them aside, I talk to them, I have them go through everything and understand whether or not I can help them or how they can help themselves by doing X, Y, and Z, right? So ask yourself or ask the person you're hiring that type of question. What is a live experience they've gone through that they can share? And it's going to show you whether or not they listen to their employees, they understand empathy, and if they can help solve whatever issue. Okay. Now, the next question was about was there a time you received tough feedback, and how did you respond? And what did you do afterward? And that is really good, because what that's going to do is that's going to say, is this person self-aware? And are they able to take that tough feedback and process it appropriately so that it can get um, translated into a more positive experience for both you as senior management and the person that you're hiring, and that you understand that if you went to them and said, hey, listen, I'm a little frustrated at this, I keep going back to you on it, you're just not hitting it where it needs to go, and they are able to take it and be like, you know what, you're right, I've been very distracted, or you know what, I haven't learned that in the way that I think is good, here's what I think. And I think that there's a lot of positivity that can come to having those types of honest conversations. I mean, you know, uncensored and uncensored and very truthful and honest in our conversations, I think can actually go a very far way. They could be uncomfortable, but is this person willing and capable of sitting in an uncomfortable spot? And I think that's something that needs to be considered, because we can have tough conversations, get tough feedback, and rather than become defensive, be a little bit more aware and do something about it. Um, how do we assess whether a candidate has grit and the stamina needed for the industry? Well, you have to have grit and stamina for this business, because if you don't, it's going to eat you up and spit you out pretty quickly. And I think that that's those people are decided, they're weeded out earlier than not. I always tell my children, when they are of the age to work at restaurants, they will work at a restaurant. My oldest is working at a restaurant this summer, and she will understand what the real world looks like and how people are treated. how it feels to be respected in a restaurant as an employee and what that looks like. And I think it's what builds grit. I think it's a great place for people to build grit. And you'll know really fast if they don't. So, give them live examples and go from there on, you know, things that you've experienced, I would say, and see how they would handle it, right? That'll show quickly. Next question is, what red flags do you look for during the interview that signal potential management issues down the line? Okay, well, one, how engaged is this person? I always like to ask difficult questions in interviews, but I like to ask simple ones too. And one of the questions that I will ask is give 5 adjectives to describe yourself. And I'm always fascinated. It's interesting. Some people can go boom, 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 and some can't. So I think self-confidence in the manager is a very important piece that needs to be um, there. I think showing up on time. I think communication to you is important. I think follow up is important. I think, it sounds a little old school in that regard, but if somebody is really interested and wants to be a part of the team, that they are putting in all effort to be part of the team, I think that's extremely valuable. And if they're not, and they have bad body language, they kind of seem, laissez-faire about it. They don't seem enthusiastic. And have them meet, obviously, with a few different people and come together as a team, as the hiring team, and see if everybody agrees or disagrees with it. But some people do a voting scale. I've heard that recently. I was talking to a few different concepts, and they have a voting scale, and they vote on the person 1 through 5. 5 being that they were a really strong candidate, 1 being we need to pass and move on is the scale that they use. And it's pretty similar to this question as a flag. If they're falling in the 1 to 2s, by more than, say there are 5 people interviewing them, by 3 people, I think it's an easy hard pass. Would you recommend working interviews for all manager hires or only in certain cases? No, I would say I absolutely would recommend working interviews for all manager hires. I actually think, as I was saying earlier, I think you should have working interviews. I think you should have interviews outside the 4 walls, whether that's I don't know, taking them to go do something like a ropes course, or I mean, we talk about the investment of these people. Sometimes that's not possible. So I understand that some of those bigger things aren't possible at certain brands, but I think it's really important spending time with them and watching them work in the business, but also outside of the business. So yes, I think that working interviews are good for all manager hires. I actually think they're good for any employee hires. Okay, the question is, when checking references, what's the one question that cuts through the noise? Well, an honest question is, why are you interviewing? Why would you be good for this role? Another good question would be, why did you leave your last one? Those are 2 really direct, really honest questions that will kind of gauge the compass on how they respond and what answers they're going to give. How can you measure a manager's impact on culture beyond staff surveys or turnover rates? That's a really good question, and one that's a little bit That's very personal. And I say that because I think that I've worked with incredible managers. I've worked with people who just elate positivity and positive environments for their employees. Um, and I mean, honestly, and they did it for me as well. They feel like magnets. You want to be around them. You want to hear what their ideas are. You want to include them. And I think that customer feedback, number one, sales at a store. That's huge. Sales speak for themselves. If you've got really good sales at a restaurant and a happy team and your numbers are good, you've got a really good manager. And yeah, I think that kind of answers it. Because there will always be people that leave and it isn't necessarily, I'm contradicting myself now by that. I'm not even going to say it. But if you've got a really good manager and a positive culture, rather than just ask the employees, the numbers, I think, are also a huge indicator for their success. Oops. Oh, I missed that last one. Sorry. I hit the button twice. Okay. Okay, this is a really good one. How do you coach managers to handle conflict before it escalates? Well, if we got to the point where there's conflict, the first question I would ask is what was happening for it to get to where's the breakdown in communication, right? That was one of the things that I said early on in this call. Communication is the first thing. So, are we communicating properly? Was there miscommunication? Most likely there is. We're going to figure it out. We're going to come together. We're going to talk. And if it doesn't solve it then and there, we're going to go work on tools to fix the conflict that we have with this person. And address it as a group together so that people feel heard and valued. And there's always, as I say, there's always two sides to every story, and then what actually happening or happened. So you want to kind of come together and work through it with them individually and together as a group. And I think that will add some value, so that things don't escalate. Oh, early signs. Okay, so the question is, what are early signs that a manager is disengaging or burning out? I mean, so funny. I'm all about the details. I mean, the details. And the second somebody starts to do something like they normally wouldn't do, whether it's a call out, whether it's an error in inventory, or they decide, you know what, I'm not doing inventory on this Friday because I just can't. It's those little moments where they're shifting, and you can only, I find in this one situation I was just talking about with this gentleman leaving after a few years, it's only after his departure that the owner was able to see the shift in the signs and the disengaging that took place. But it's usually lack of communication, sloppy, not paying attention, not caring as much, it just, the lines messy. Like, there are little things that you're just like, what's going on? And that's usually the beginning of the end. Oh, wow. Okay. This is a really good one. Have I seen a restaurant change successfully? Have I seen a restaurant chain successfully recover from multiple bad hires, and what did they do? Yes. you can recover from bad hires. I have seen it. I have been a part of it. What did we do? I think you really try to go in. There might be multiple. I talked about the trickle down effect before. So in that restaurant, you might have a few employees that might also be toxic. So I think you need to listen to the people who are there. Usually it's longer standing employees, believe it or not, that will come forward and share their frustrations. And oftentimes the manager just won't do anything about it. And it becomes a problem. And so after the manager that's toxic has gone and we've gotten rid of the other toxic employees, those team members often will come forward, and I would suggest at that time you have them work with you on trying to find another fit for the restaurant. And sometimes what we've done is we've shifted people at different restaurants around, which is another great idea, so that you can shake it up a bit and get some new blood into the stores, which is sometimes very much welcomed. But people who are part of the original culture and try and infiltrate on the back end of it. And it has worked. So something to consider if you feel like you've constantly failed at it. Get rid of all the toxicity in there, and then work with the ones who aren't toxic, and bring in some other team members who can help support it and get it back on its feet. I'm going to take this last question. This is a great one to end on, rather. If you could change one thing about how this industry hires managers today, what would it be? I don't know if it's because when you grow older, you become much wiser, but I believe wholeheartedly in a very empathetic um, and listening approach to working with people. And I think I've learned a lot in the coaching that I've been doing over the last many years now. I think that we need to spend more time getting to know the people that are going to be coming into our brands and that we're hiring. And I think sometimes we just get caught in the day to day of, we got to get somebody in here because we've, got all these events and we've got all this stuff going. But that's fine, that they can go through the hiring process. But I think it's very important that the managers that we are bringing in to support us and our brands and our team members need to really have an understanding of what your expectations are as higher leaders. And I wish more than anything we would take a little bit more time to get to know those that we're bringing into our brands and those that we work with. I love, and I try to teach this, to really have somebody get to know their employees. And I say this all the time to COOs and CEOs. I'll say, what's one cool thing you can tell me about the guy that makes your sandwiches? Because I think that that's important. These are all human beings. And I think that bringing that back a little bit more in this very AI tech world. We are in the hospitality industry, and we are about giving really good service. And I believe that that always comes from the top down, and making sure that our managers are set up for success, but that we as the leaders of organizations are doing everything that we can to make sure that we're giving the time to them that they deserve. So that is my final, and I will end with that, and with a lot of gratitude for all of you who tuned in today. And ask yourself the tough question: if it's not going the way that you want, it's the manager.